What's going on, guys, and welcome back. So it's only Tuesday. We got a few more days to go, and today I have my top 7 decks for DLC Toronto. And what makes this DLC interesting is Set 5 is not released to all the big box stores yet, so it is not legal for this event. However, the Bucky errata, nerf, whatever you want to call it, spade and neutering, is in effect. So Bucky essentially sucks for this event, and that changes things up pretty drastically. So first and foremost, blue steel. I don't want to say this deck cannot compete. I just think that this deck loses quite a bit because it had such a good Bucky matchup, and I think that the way the format is going to be isn't going to be quite as kind for blue steel. Don't get me wrong, this deck will top the event. This deck may make it pretty far into the top. However, it is not in my top 5 for this event. It is just on the outside looking in. I'd probably put it at number 6. My other honorable mention deck that you should not be sleeping on, and you really should know what they do: Amethyst Steel, that mid-grow where it hits early with Maleficent and Smee, and then it has the steel songs, the foxes, the goats, the rabbits to come into that mid to late game control and finish out the game. Both of these decks have the potential to top, and probably will, and they have the potential to make a very far run in this event. However, top 5 decks. Here we go. Number 5, Popsicle Control. I think this deck is really strong. We've seen it kind of start fading off a little bit, and some changes, I think, because tempo is going to be a little bit better. The Lemon Lime Song deck has been popping up a bit more. Obviously, Bucky's not a thing, which actually does help this, but again, Bucky being away kind of opens the door for some more aggro strategies. So I think this deck can absolutely see some success, but I'd be curious to see how things like Queen of Hearts and Sisu do, because they help answer those early aggro threats, which this deck can struggle against. And then the top end of this deck can just handle the Ruby Amethyst or the Steel Song, especially because I think Steel Song is incredibly strong as well. So I think this deck has a really strong chance if built and piloted correctly. And personally, I think Queen of Hearts, at least, possibly even Sisu, find their way into these decks because of tempo and other aggressive strategies that can shine a little bit more now that Bucky is getting pushed out to a degree. So some other things, again, all these lists will be linked down below. I'm not going to go through and explain everything in depth, just kind of showing off a sample deck list that you could try to run. 4 Tala, 4 Hiram for consistency, your Mauis because you want to get rid of them castles as soon as possible, Madame Medusa, obviously really strong, Tamatoy, your closer, and then Maleficent because it's like the one deck that can actually get this card out decently quick because of the ramp. Some other consistency and removal cards: Develop Your Brain, Brawl, no surprises there. The one jump how far ramp engine, I love this engine so much in the game. If you hit them both, I know they're both uninkable, but you get to 5 ink on turn 3, and you get to add a card to your hand because of the how far. I think it's super good for consistency. It is super good for the ramp, and it's just really strong overall. Obviously then too, B prep is just an absolute blowout. Some might say you have to play 4. Well, I disagree. If I was going to play 4 B prep, I would cut Ice Block down to 2, but I think Ice Block really is going to help this deck shine because of the Sisu. If you don't play Little Sisu, you can absolutely drop this card down as well. I just think between Brawl, Medusa, Sisu, if you have that Ice Block, I think it's just so strong into all of these top deck matchups then because of it. So I personally like it. For this event. Doesn't mean it's going to be good into set 5, but we'll see. This is not set 5, so we're not going to talk about that anymore. Popsicle, Fishbone, Lucky Dime, kind of just the bread and butter, the standard, and that is rounding out my number 5 deck, which brings us to number 4. What is number 4? Lemon Lime Songs. So this deck only plays like 12 uninkable cards. Double Cinderella because she's got a handful of songs that she can sing. Kita Shift because, well, the Kita Shift into Under the Sea is a very strong blowout versus every deck. This deck also very good into aggro matchups, so maybe aggro doesn't see that much success because I think this deck fares pretty good into it, as well as Steel Song, which I also have on this list, hint hint. Sir Hiss being in there we've seen because the evasive, the 3 attack is really good. Diablo, again, even without Bucky, because this deck didn't play Bucky to begin with, so Bucky not being a thing doesn't hurt it at all. Some discard players may gravitate towards this deck because of it even. Shift turn 2 Diablo, the shift, it's just so strong, and if they can't answer it, you're in a really good spot. Ursula, Ariel, Prince John, all pretty standard there. Muses was starting to find her way into this deck as the format went on last in set 4. I definitely think that her bouncing your own Ariel for the recursive advantage or just slowing your opponent's tempo is going to be very strong in here. Again, Kita, Cricky helping you close games, deal with opponent's boards, Lucifer just finishing off their hand. You Have Forgotten Me, another card to just finish off their hand. Songs, you get Paint the Roses Red, helps you with lowering their strength on characters, and in addition to that, you get to draw a card. Bare Necessities, Sudden Chill, some discard cards. We don't talk about Bruno, and Under the Sea. So this is my number 4 deck for Toronto. Bringing us to number 3. If I was going to Toronto, this is the deck I would play because I absolutely love this deck. Tempo. Not that it had a horrible Bucky matchup, but I think Bucky going away helps the deck because it didn't have the greatest Bucky matchup either. Bucky's just another steel deck, especially with Ursula double singing those songs that just handles this deck too good. So you might see something along the lines of this, where if they hit that Merfolk Flynn 1-2, it's so strong. It is so strong. You have Chernobog as another option, which helps with consistency as well. The Pegasus shift line, because if you hit like your Merfolk Flynn, Pegasus, shift Pegasus, all of a sudden they get evasive. Like, you quest out so fast. This deck gets so aggressive. Giving your questers evasive is so strong too. How many times can we say so in one deck rundown? Madam Mim Snake helps you protect. You can play your Merfolk. Turn 2, you quest. Bounce your, or play your Snake, bounce your Merfolk, come back with your Merfolk. Works really, really effectively. You all know how that works. Again, Flynn, Ursula, you're going to have your Foxes. Crabs, I think that they're needed. I think Ruby Amethyst is going to be insanely popular, and your Fox being able to one-shot a castle, I think is going to be really, really important. So I do think Crab should be in your list if you're going to be playing this deck in Toronto. For Diablo, 2 Jacques. It came down to me, it was Jacques or Tiberius, and I think the questing for 2 and Inkable is good enough for me. 1 less strength, and you don't get the passive opponent losing lore and your characters are banished. But at the same time, I'm trying to be the aggressor and less about slowing my opponent down. I think Jacques is just kind of a nice little tempo disruption, 4 willpower, and again can quest for 2. 3 Kit Cloud Kicker, again, you're disrupting their tempo, you're slowing them down, you're helping your Merfolk Flynn stick to the board to be able to win out the game quickly. Goat for game is just one of the best feelings in the game. So goat for game, we're playing 4 goats, 4 rabbits for consistency. Again, Cricky's a great closer. It helps you deal with boards, quest for 3, really strong card. And then the Pegasus shift line. Just 4 friends, 4 castles, rounding it out, consistency, just power cards. I really like Tempo. I think Tempo's got a strong chance to make a deep run. I'm also going to go out on a limb and say at least 1 Tempo does make top 8 at Toronto. I think it's going to happen. Also, don't be surprised if like 1 blue steel sneaks in there just so they can say you didn't have this deck in your top 5. But, at the end of the day, had to pick 5, and really between those 7, I think the gap is so small. Like those 7 decks are the top 5. You can pick which order you want to put them in. Bringing me to my number 2 deck, though, I was really close to putting this deck at number 1. And I think it just handles so many decks so well. I was really tempted to put in the Piglet over the Ursula, so that is a pivot option if you would like. You can play Piglet and Smee as aggressive options on 2, and take the Ursula Singer out of the deck. 2 Cinderella. This list is pretty close to what Bivens had ran, slightly different just because, again, the format is no Bucky, so it changes a few things. Queen, Robin Hood, both incredibly strong lines. Ursula being the four singer, really good. We see our cost curve ends at 5, which really helps the deck out. Again, you can play Piglet instead as a pivot option. Even if you did like 3 Piglet and put in a third Ursula or Cinderella for the 4 Ursulas. Force Me, the Ariels, Rapunzels, Queen, Robin Hood. Nothing fancy, nothing crazy. A couple bare necessities. World's Greatest Criminal Mind with your Queen engine. Storm Rage on, just the 3 strength. I think that's plenty. 2 Zeus, 2 Swords, 4 Whole New Worlds. And because of the number 1 deck, if you didn't guess it already, we are going to run the Pride Lands and the Flutes just as ways to help deal with Ruby Amethyst. Hint, you should have seen it coming. The unequal count for the deck is still at 18, which I don't think is crazy or anything absurd or unheard of for this deck. So that brings us to number 1, which I'm not going to do any drum rolls. We just said what it is. So how would my Ruby Amethyst list look for this event? I don't think, because of the Bucky, so biggest thing here is Bucky discard gone, right? So Bucky discard is gone, which means you don't need every interaction to replace itself to gain a new card, right? And it also means more aggressive strategies are going to be played, which means you need more than just the 4 1-drops. So we're going back to the 7 1-drop count. I'm liking Rafiki in that extra spot. Chernobog Followers obviously is going to be the first option. I like Rafiki as that other option though. Just playing it at 3 gives us the 7 1s. We did take out the Maleficent Sorceress just for some other options, like I said, the Rafiki, and also playing the Crab, because once again, with discard being out, aside from Lemon Lime, which I think is still going to be good, but it's not Emerald Steel Bucky good. So Maleficent comes out because you don't need every single card to replace itself. Like when you're playing against Bucky, literally that's how it is. You had to control your hand, you had to get to that 7 ink, you had to reset the board, and then you start dropping your castles, your goats, bouncing your cards, trading off your Medusas, your Tremaines into their characters. You're bouncing them, you're replaying them, things like that. But we don't necessarily have to do that as much. Not to say you don't want the consistency of the deck, but I don't think Maleficent is necessarily as needed without Bucky discard being such a big threat. We're still playing the Flynn Sisu Castle playline because it's still really good. It's still really good. 4 Fox, 2 Crabs. Like I said, Crab finds its way back in. 4 Goats, 4 Rabbits, 4 Maui. The 1 Tremaine, 3 Medusas, 4 Brawls. I think that's pretty standard, pretty good, pretty common. The 4-3-4 in our song lineup, that is going to stay the same, kind of been pretty similar there. And then the 4 Queens Castles. So these are my top 7 decks for DLC Toronto, which is kind of a fake, made up, random 1 weekend deal. But it's kind of like, oh, hey, what would the format have been like without Bucky? Doesn't matter. New format next week. It's interesting. It's different. It's fun. But at the end of the day, these are the 5 decks I would say. I think a ton of players are going to gravitate to Ruby Amethyst because it's figured out, because people know it's just generally good versus everything. It's got tools for everything. It's on the cheaper side. And so many people already have the deck that I think a lot of people are going to gravitate. I would not be surprised if like 30% of the playing field is playing Ruby Amethyst. I expect it to be overwhelmingly in the top 64, like probably 20 plus Ruby Amethyst would not surprise me. Not saying they're going to hit 20, but if there's 20 Ruby Amethyst, it would not surprise me one bit at all. However, I wouldn't be surprised if the deck doesn't win the event still. I think it's open. I think all 7 of them decks can absolutely win, and maybe we get a like in Atlanta, where we get a random, deck, homebrew, different, under the radar deck that wins, and so no one sees it coming because who knows? It's a format that we weren't really ready for. So it'll be interesting to see. I'm excited to see it. And until next time, guys, like, share, subscribe, comment down below your top 5, 3, 1 deck for this event. Take care.